Story 1: Ohio Humanoid Encounter. Therefore, I am not, or at least I was not, a proponent of supernatural phenomena or entities such as Bigfoot. However, my perspective may have shifted. Just a few weeks ago, or perhaps mere days, I witnessed an event, and I am currently experiencing considerable mental distress, attempting to rationalize it. I entertain the possibility that I might have experienced a hallucination, or perhaps misidentified a commonplace animal as this peculiar entity. I remain uncertain, yet I feel as though my cognitive faculties are deteriorating. Several weeks prior, I was engaged in an evening stroll, quite late, indeed around 10 o'clock at night. My residence is situated in a respectable district on the periphery of Columbus, Ohio, although the area currently presents a somewhat disheveled appearance due to ongoing developmental enhancements involving the construction of new residences. Directly opposite the intersection where my street branches off the principal thoroughfare, there exists a sequence of dilapidated structures that are presently undergoing the process of demolition. Behind these aforementioned buildings lies an expanse of heavily wooded territory. The indigenous fauna predominantly inhabiting our locality comprises deer, various avian species, and a sparse population of feral felines, thus signifying nothing overtly alarming or unusual. I possess a thorough familiarity with the topographical arrangement of the vicinity. I derive pleasure from perambulating in that location due to its inherent tranquility and quietude, offering a distinct respite from the incessant traffic of highways and urban clamor. Consequently, I was proceeding with my customary stroll, occasionally dislodging a brick or a loose stone, when my auditory perception registered a sound originating to my right from the direction of the woods. It resembled the displacement of bricks or some other material from a wall, an occurrence potentially attributable to either gusts of wind or the actions of a stray animal. Therefore, I genuinely felt no immediate apprehension. At least, my lack of concern persisted until I discerned the noise once more, but on this occasion, its sound registered as being considerably nearer to my position. Subsequently, I was overcome by an unsettling sensation, akin to being enclosed within a fishbowl, as if I were being meticulously observed. I became profoundly agitated, yet I endeavored to maintain my composure, continuously reasoning that a rational explanation must exist. As previously stated, our area lacks any noteworthy wildlife that would induce fear, and I frequent this location regularly. I retrieved my mobile telephone, activated its integrated flashlight, and proceeded towards the source of the sounds. I heard it again, but this time it emanated from a greater distance, which, in the peculiar machinations of my brain, ostensibly corroborated the notion that this was merely a stray feline or some similar creature. My apprehension diminished as I navigated around various scattered debris and concrete cinder blocks. The outdoor temperature was frigid, prompting me to hasten my pace as much as possible. Upon reaching the edge of the wooded area, I finally beheld this entity. It presented as a kind of human-like being, bearing an uncanny resemblance to Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. Its dermal surface was noticeably pale and white, akin to the bark of a birch tree. It was traversing on all four limbs and appeared entirely unclad. The moment I directed the beam of my light upon it, it immediately became motionless and fixed its gaze upon me. It possessed expansive black eyes that, while appearing devoid of expression, conveyed a profound sense of intelligence, as though fully comprehending the unfolding circumstances. It even inclined its cranium, suggesting either bewilderment or inquisitive intent. Notably, it lacked a discernible nose, and its oral aperture, its mouth, was merely a gash appearing like a slit incised into its facial structure. Following what felt like an interminable duration, it simply darted into the dense woods. This peculiar creature exhibited such striking human characteristics, yet simultaneously possessed a profoundly alien aspect, and its locomotion was of an impossibly rapid nature. Indeed, I cannot recall ever having observed an entity of its apparent bulk exhibiting such velocity previously. I was overcome with nausea and essentially sprinted back towards my residence. My home was situated merely 10 minutes distance from that precise location. Sleep eluded me that entire night as the vivid image of this ghoulish humanoid creature ceaselessly replayed in my mind. I refrained from confiding in anyone primarily due to my apprehension. What if they were to perceive me as delusional? What if I had simply misidentified a canine or some other common animal, and my mind was overly stressed to accurately process what my eyes had beheld? Consequently, the following night, I ventured out once more, approximately at the same hour. On this occasion, however, I ensured I carried a knife with me, purely as a precautionary measure. I made my way towards the edge of the wooded area and patiently awaited its reemergence, yet it never appeared. I repeated this ritual for several subsequent nights, each time experiencing disappointment. Ultimately, I ceased these nightly vigils, as by that point I had become convinced that I had merely imagined the entire encounter. Several nights later, approximately a week following the initial sighting, as I was driving homeward from my employment, something unexpectedly darted directly across the path of my automobile. I abruptly applied the brakes, bringing my vehicle to a halt amidst the thoroughfare. Staring unblinkingly directly at me was the very creature. A shudder still courses through me, merely recollecting the moment. Its ocular organs appeared utterly devoid of warmth, yet were filled with an unnerving, calculating intensity, as if it possessed a full comprehension of my presence within the car, or perhaps even a direct recollection of my identity. It did not stand frozen in the manner of a deer, which typically appears startled or disoriented. Instead, it conveyed the impression that its presence there was entirely by deliberate choice. Then it rose to an upright position. I can genuinely attest that this constituted the most profoundly unsettling spectacle I have ever witnessed. It ascended, revealing its limbs, both arms and legs, to be unusually elongated, and it simply continued to gaze intently at me. Its stature must have approximated 6 feet in height. The sensation was akin to it peering directly into the depths of my very soul. I was on the verge of losing bladder control. My cardiac rhythm accelerated dramatically, and I had never, throughout my entire existence, experienced such an extreme degree of terror. I observed as it ambled away into the distant tree line, its gait eerily resembling that of a human. At some indeterminate moment, I mustered the resolve within myself to resume driving. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and I felt a profound sense of nausea and debility as I began to accelerate. In my side mirrors, I once again caught sight of it, galloping alongside my vehicle. That is to say, it was running on all 4 limbs, much like a canine, and I was then traveling at approximately 10 or 15 miles per hour, which indicates a remarkably swift pace for such a creature. As it ran, it produced a peculiar vocalization, resembling a distinct clicking sound. I intensified my speed until the creature was no longer visible. I have since recounted this experience to several individuals, and many are convinced I am mentally unstable. Indeed, I myself harbor doubts regarding my sanity. While some individuals do offer credence to my account, I possess no tangible evidence of this entity's existence or of my encounter with it. There were no tracks, nothing left behind, and I feel an overwhelming compulsion that I cannot find peace until I ascertain the true nature of that creature. Story 2: Alaska National Forest Encounter. I found myself stationed in that region for a 3-month contractual agreement. I had been collaborating with my supervisor for a significant number of years, establishing a rather favorable professional arrangement, and I possessed, and indeed still maintain, strong bonds with a select group of individuals among the team members. As soon as all the requisite documentation and formalities were meticulously addressed, I journeyed northward by air, accompanied by 2 additional colleagues who reside in close proximity to me in California. We maintain consistent contact and are typically engaged for these assignments collectively. Their given names are Jed and Chuck. Both individuals possess approximately a decade more experience than myself. Nevertheless, given that my father and grandfather were also professional timber harvesters, the occupation is deeply ingrained within my lineage, and this heritage garners their considerable respect. We embarked on a flight to rendezvous with our head supervisor and the remaining members of the operational team, comprising around 15 individuals in total, which included 2 inexperienced novices undergoing instruction on operating skidding equipment. I am personally a skinner operator and had been designated to perform precisely that role on this particular assignment. Our initial day was dedicated simply to settling into the temporary accommodations that had been provided to us by the Arbor Sentinel Bureau. On the subsequent day, we proceeded to survey the extensive land area. We were situated within the Emerald Peak Preserve in southeast Alaska, a vast territory that has been subjected to timber harvesting operations for many centuries. Our supervisor meticulously reviewed the operational blueprints with us, detailing the methodology for managing the topographical configuration of the terrain and prioritizing which trees were to be felled initially. The task appeared quite unambiguous and routine, and our tenure on site was scheduled from June through the latter part of August. This period represents the ideal time to be situated in Alaska, as it corresponds with the apex of summer and typically offers the most favorable climatic conditions. Consequently, I was also eagerly anticipating the opportunity to explore the surrounding environment as extensively as feasible. The specific parcel of land upon which we were engaged in work was largely uncomplicated, featuring only a slight elevation towards the western direction, presenting no challenge that I, as a skidder operator, could not readily manage. Jed, too, operates the skidder machinery, while Chuck fulfills the role of a faller, one of the individuals professionally tasked with the actual felling of trees. He additionally serves as a climber when necessity dictates, a detail that proves significant to the unfolding narrative. Approximately 2 weeks following the commencement of our assignment, one of the newer, less experienced crew members sustained an ankle injury when a substantial log inadvertently rolled onto it, necessitating Chuck to temporarily assume the duties of a climber in his stead. Climbers ascend to considerable elevations to sever the upper limbs of trees, thereby rendering the subsequent felling of the remaining trunk significantly safer. The panoramic vista, particularly within the Alaskan landscape, must assuredly be breathtaking, but owing to my personal aversion to significant heights, this particular role is not a viable option for my participation. He was positioned high atop a Sitka spruce, meticulously inspecting his safety harness prior to initiating any cuts, when he abruptly paused and transmitted a message via his radio. "I am observing something advancing in our direction from the east," he reported, an occurrence deemed rather atypical given the considerable volume of auditory output we were generating with our various saws and heavy machinery. To the east of our current operational location lay a subtle topographical ridge, and Chuck elaborated that the creature was traversing in proximity to the ridge's edge, yet still remained concealed within the dense canopy of the trees. Our supervisor, Frank, advised against apprehension, stating that the perceived entity was not located within our designated logging zone and would undoubtedly be deterred by the considerable noise we were producing. Chuck resumed his duties while I was occupied with transporting a substantial quantity of tree trunks to the designated landing area. Approximately 1 minute subsequent to this, he re-engaged on the radio to inform us that the creature was continuing its approach along the ridge. Jose, another climber who was situated high on a different spruce tree, corroborated the observation. He possessed a more unobstructed vantage point of the animal and conveyed that its coloration was distinctly white. Jed expressed enthusiasm, surmising it might be a spirit bear, an entirely white variation of a black bear that is exceedingly rare to encounter. However, mere moments later, Jose again activated his radio, his voice clearly imbued with fear this time. Frank attempted to reassure him, but Jose commenced his descent from the tree without delay. Chuck remained aloft in his spruce, yet he maintained an uncharacteristic silence. I initiated communication via an alternative radio frequency, one we occasionally utilized for informal conversations, inquiring about his well-being. It required several attempts before he eventually replied. "I do not believe it is a bear," he stated in a grave tone. "It is simply too large." He swiftly transitioned back to the primary communication channel to converse with Frank, reiterating that the unidentified entity was maintaining its position along the ridge. Frank ultimately relented and declared an early lunch break. Jose appeared profoundly distressed at this juncture, but Chuck maintained his composure. He conveyed to Jed and me his absolute conviction that it was not, in fact, a bear. Jose concurred, asserting that it must be a yeti. Initially, I found myself chuckling, but observing Chuck's lack of amusement, I inquired if that indeed was his own assessment. He explained that although he had not achieved an unobstructed view of it due to the considerable distance, it undeniably moved with a gait reminiscent of an ape, an assertion difficult to dispute given the markedly distinct ambulation patterns of apes and bears. Both men adamantly stated that the creature had been walking on two legs, bipedally, along the crest of the ridge and had repeatedly paused, seemingly attempting to discern our activities. Once the lunch period concluded, Chuck promptly reascended the spruce tree. He then radioed down that the enigmatic creature was no longer visible anywhere within his sight. I myself never managed to catch a glimpse of it, but judging by the profound reactions of Chuck and Jose, it strongly suggests they witnessed something entirely unforeseen in that particular region, or indeed anywhere else. I would not be entirely astonished were it to be definitively established that the entity was a yeti or some analogous creature, primarily because the Emerald Peak Preserve encompasses an immense expanse, totaling slightly over 16 million acres. Such a vast habitat would moreover elucidate why the whatever it was had not been frightened away by the sounds of our operations and, conversely, might even have been attracted by them, not comprehending their true nature. Throughout the remainder of our deployment there, Chuck and the other climbers, a total of 4 individuals on the team, maintained a vigilant watch, yet the creature was never observed again. If it was indeed a yeti, Bigfoot, or an entity of comparable nature, it likely assimilated the understanding that it ought not to linger in the vicinity, and consequently departed in an alternative direction. Since that incident, I habitually exercise enhanced vigilance during our various assignments, but I have not encountered anything comparably peculiar once more, even when working in the most remote and dense woodland areas. Story 3: Thunderbird Giant Bird Encounter. My current assignment involved an inquiry into a report originating from a local agricultural establishment concerning the inexplicable deaths of several bovine animals. When an owner of livestock suffers the loss of an animal due to predatory actions, they are formally obliged to document and report such occurrences. A significant facet of my professional responsibilities involves endeavoring to mitigate instances of friction between livestock owners and wild animal populations. I approach this aspect of my work with considerable gravity. Indeed, it constitutes a primary motivation for my pursuing this particular career path. My aspiration is to contribute to the preservation of natural environments to the utmost of my ability, yet simultaneously, I find it regrettable to witness agriculturalists incurring losses of their valuable livestock. This specific scenario presented itself as notably perplexing. The agriculturalist reported not only the disappearance of multiple bovine animals, but also the presence of several injured ones, which he was subsequently compelled to humanely terminate. The nature of the injuries observed on the cattle defied conventional explanation. These included fractured limbs and severe cranial trauma, patterns of harm not typically associated with the predatory behaviors of a bear, a wolf, or a mountain lion. While the cattle did exhibit superficial scratches and, on occasion, puncture wounds along their flanks, these were not of sufficient severity to instigate mortality. I formally documented his reports, yet I possessed limited avenues for providing effective solutions, at least until such a time as I could ascertain the identity of the perpetrator. I instructed him to contact me immediately upon discovering another deceased or injured cow within the grazing land, as I wished to conduct a personal examination. Upon my arrival, precisely as he had articulated, a bovine animal lay lifeless in the pasture. The rancher informed me that an additional 3 cattle had vanished during the preceding night, with no discernible trace of their whereabouts. I proceeded to inspect the carcass of the cow. There was coagulated blood emanating from both its nasal passages and oral cavity. The creature's cranium had sustained a significant indentation on one lateral aspect, and 3 of its 4 limbs were undeniably fractured. Furthermore, what appeared to be distinct claw marks were visible on both sides of its dorsal region. I had anticipated gaining some clarity after personally observing the cow, but my expectations were unmet. The cow had not been consumed, and it is unequivocally uncharacteristic for predators expending such considerable effort to fell a bovine animal to subsequently abandon such a substantial meal. The rancher and I traversed the perimeter of the fencing, seeking any potential ingress point through which a substantial predator might have entered. I acknowledge that wolves and mountain lions are capable of readily circumventing fences, either by burrowing beneath or scaling over them. Yet this particular damage pattern did not align with the typical methods of either species. We theorized that perhaps a breach in the fence had occurred, allowing an aggressive bison to gain entry, as that is virtually the sole indigenous animal capable of inflicting such extensive harm. However, upon inspection, the fence remained entirely intact. I possessed limited counsel to offer the rancher, apart from recommending the installation of trail cameras. It required several months before anything conclusive was captured on one of these surveillance devices. The rancher subsequently presented himself at my Wildlife Alliance office with the images he had retrieved from the trail camera, and these visuals rendered the situation even more unfathomable than before. There was a complete absence of any indications of a predator. Instead, it appeared as though the bovine animal had simply plummeted directly from the heavens. This scenario would logically account for the extensive cranial trauma and the fractured limbs, but it provided no elucidation as to how the cow could have found itself in a situation precipitating a fall from the sky. All of us stationed within the Wildlife Alliance office were gathered intently around these photographs, collectively striving to decipher their meaning. One of the rangers, after a cursory glance, declared with certainty that he understood the phenomenon. He posited that it was a thunderbird. He elaborated that indigenous populations have spoken of such creatures for generations. While the majority of individuals now presume their extinction, he asserted their continued existence, acknowledging that their numbers are considerably diminished. He added that they are typically observed immediately preceding or directly following a storm. Not a single person among us offered him credence. Most of us regarded his assertion as a jest. Subsequent to this, another individual facetiously suggested it might have been an alien abduction, prompting general laughter from everyone present, with the sole exception of the rancher himself. Nevertheless, the perplexing nature of the situation continued to trouble me. I remained utterly unable to formulate a rational explanation for precisely what was befalling this rancher's livestock. I pondered the conundrum for several weeks, yet I could not conceive of a single viable explanation. Ultimately, I made the decision to drive out to the rancher's premises to converse with him once more, not under the illusion that I would uncover definitive answers on this occasion. A "for sale" sign was prominently displayed at the terminus of his driveway upon my arrival. The rancher informed me that he was in the process of relocating his entire agricultural enterprise, explaining that his cattle were no longer secure there, nor did he himself feel safe any longer. I had genuinely hoped he had not fixated on the notion of extraterrestrial beings, as I was acquainted with certain elderly farmers who had embraced such beliefs and were both notably eccentric, and then he presented me with a photograph. He recounted that subsequent to the other ranger's comments regarding the Thunderbird, he meticulously reviewed all his previous reports concerning missing or deceased cattle. He then cross-referenced these incidents with weather records, discovering that the bovine occurrences consistently coincided with the presence of thunderstorms. During the next thunderstorm, he ventured out to the pasture and finally witnessed the creature responsible for harming his cows. He displayed the photograph to me. It was challenging to discern clearly, obscured by the stormy backdrop, yet it undeniably depicted a colossal avian entity, a bird of a magnitude comparable to a bus. The sight was utterly incredible. The photographic quality was not exceptional. I attempted to magnify its facial features, but clear identification proved difficult. It possessed a distinct reptilian characteristic, appearing almost like a hybrid between a powerful eagle and a prehistoric dinosaur. I was at a loss for words. I had no proposals for how to eradicate this entity, or even precisely what it truly was. The rancher stated unequivocally that he had no desire to reside anywhere in its proximity. He confided that he was unable to sleep soundly at night, tormented by the knowledge of its presence, and I frankly do not fault him for that sentiment. I myself never directly observed the colossal bird, but I did undertake some preliminary research. It appears there are other anecdotal accounts similar to the rancher's, narratives detailing livestock found with blunt force trauma and fractured legs. Such incidents do not occur with frequent regularity, but they do indeed transpire. My conjecture is that these immense birds intended to consume the cattle, but for some undisclosed reason, the prey animals inadvertently slipped from their formidable grasp. This constitutes the sole plausible explanation I have been able to formulate. Story 4: Halloween Party Humanoid Encounter. This particular narrative is undeniably peculiar. I find myself recounting this tale at least once annually. Fortunately, I was not the sole individual to undergo the extraordinary events that transpired. My sister and two of my close companions were also present, and they can fully corroborate my account. This incident unfolded several years past, as we were diligently preparing for a rather elaborate Halloween celebration. The event itself was not scheduled for Halloween proper, but rather for the weekend preceding it. We customarily host a substantial gathering, as Halloween holds considerable significance within our familial traditions. Being of Irish ancestry, any festivity connected to Irish heritage or the ancient Celtic customs, such as Halloween, we tend to commemorate with grandiosity. We devoted the majority of that day to affixing various decorative elements throughout the interior of the house. We had already strung lights and positioned several items outdoors, including inflatable displays and a pair of decorative figures. One such figure was a scarecrow placed upon a garden bench outside, and we also had a witch figure. Both decorations proved to be highly effective and visually appealing. I personally retrieved a pair of kegs, which I then situated outdoors in proximity to the fire pit, nestled within capacious containers filled with ice. We had positioned 2 sizable picnic tables, and we opted to leave the trampoline assembled as well. I additionally brought forth the foosball table for entertainment. My sister had arranged another elongated table equipped with beer pong setups. In the subterranean level, our basement, there was a pool table, ensuring a diverse array of activities were available. We had successfully organized similar events on previous occasions. Furthermore, I had recently acquired a substantial quantity of firewood, which I meticulously stacked into an impressive pile adjacent to the outdoor fire pit. Guests began to arrive around 6 or 7 in the evening. During the initial few hours, a considerable multitude of individuals made their appearance, but as is characteristic with the progression of such nocturnal festivities, attendees often circulate to other social gatherings, potentially returning later. As the hour grew later, the size of the party gradually diminished until ultimately, by approximately midnight, perhaps only 15 or 20 of us remained. Some individuals were inside the residence while others congregated outdoors around the warmth of the fire. Our property, while not vast, is quite extensive, extending considerably towards the rear, where a discernible tree line marks the boundary, leading directly into a public park. At one juncture during the night's proceedings, we distinctly heard something topple within our shed, and the resulting sound startled several individuals. Consequently, a few of my friends and I decided to investigate. We utilized our mobile phones as improvised flashlights and proceeded towards the shed. The structure is situated roughly halfway between our primary residence and the rear boundary of the property, in close proximity to the trees. Upon reaching the shed, I cautiously unlatched and slowly opened its door. We directed our lights inward, observing that a considerable quantity of items had fallen. Tools, various pieces of yard equipment. They were strewn haphazardly across the floor. It was perplexing, yet it offered a logical explanation for the intensity of the noise. The shed's sole point of entry is through its single door, which had been securely closed when we approached it. One of my companions posited that the items were likely not as firmly secured as we had presumed, and their initial fall from the wall or a similar fixture then subsequently dislodged the remaining contents. I then resecured the door and we returned to the fire pit, electing to dismiss the incident from our thoughts. Several more hours elapsed and the remaining attendees gradually began their departure. It was now approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. I accompanied 2 of my friends to their vehicle when we distinctly heard something subtly shuffling in the pervasive darkness. We halted and I directed the illumination from my phone towards my friend's Jeep. Something shifted adjacent to the vehicle's wheel. I extinguished the light to observe if it would re-emerge, and we remained motionless with my friends for several minutes. I then reactivated the light, aiming it towards the wheel. There, standing, was a small, humanoid entity, which then swiftly ducked back towards the Jeep's wheel. All of us witnessed it, but initially, no one could obtain a clear visual. Consequently, I again switched off the light, and we quietly advanced a short distance. I reactivated the light, and the creature remained in its position. It possessed large, luminous eyes and small ears, Its limbs, both arms and legs, were notably slender and elongated. I could distinctly perceive one of its diminutive hands gripping onto the tire. It appeared to have 6 delicate fingers firmly embedded within the grooves of the tire's tread. The creature was visibly trembling. At that point, one of my friends began to exhibit profound alarm, and the entity swiftly vanished. We hastily moved towards the location where it had been, but it was gone. We dedicated the ensuing 90 minutes to meticulously searching the entirety of the property for any indication of the diminutive figure. We even extended our search to the adjacent properties of both my neighbors. However, we never located the creature. We also thoroughly inspected the immediate area surrounding the Jeep. There were no discernible footprints or handprints present on either the Jeep itself or its tires. It was then that our thoughts reverted to the shed. We quietly made our way back to the shed and forcefully swung open its doors. Inside, there was nothing but the disarray we had observed earlier. We then contemplated venturing into the trees, but concluded that attempting to locate anything within the dense woodland at that late hour would prove exceedingly difficult. My friends and my sister assisted me in re-examining the area the following morning. It was then that we began to discover some peculiar items, not near the Jeep, but next to my sister's car. There was an unusual small accumulation of acorns, merely 4 or 5 of them, somewhat stacked adjacent to her tire. Subsequently, we found a compact wad of string beneath my friend's Ford Taurus. It comprised approximately 2 feet of string, meticulously coiled into a spherical shape. We brought these items into the house and presented them to our other friends, who had disbelieved our account the previous night. They remained skeptical even after seeing the physical evidence, presuming we were orchestrating a prank given the approaching Halloween holiday. I resolved to maintain an outdoor vigil each night for the subsequent 2 weeks. 2 of my friends who had witnessed the event joined me and spent time outdoors. However, we never observed anything further. Occasionally, when I encounter odd or inexplicable objects, it serves to remind me of that singular night. My sister, for her part, consistently refuses to discuss the incident. However, my friends and I, who were direct witnesses, have shared the story with a select few individuals. The majority, predictably, do not credit our assertions. I remain profoundly uncertain as to the precise nature of what we witnessed, or indeed if it will ever reappear, but the experience frequently occupies my thoughts. I often wonder, has anyone among you ever encountered or learned of a creature that corresponds to this detailed description?